best way to explain my life was to put it into decades, because born in 1932, so that first 10 years of my life was very happy. My father was away at sea. He could be away for 3 months at a time. My mother had already opened her shop, and I enjoyed the shop. I'd get round behind the counter, which was a privilege, I thought, because everybody else had to stay that side of the counter. And of course I could enjoy the orange Smarties out of the Smartie box, which was, nobody else knew they were orange Smarties when they were weighed out. They weren't in the little tubes, because I'd eaten most of them out of the box. But of course the war came in 1939, and that overlapped into my second decade. And in that time, of course, there was rationing. We were on very low food supplies. It took 6 years before I saw my grandparents and my uncles and aunts who lived in Belgium. The war came, and we had air raids and blackouts. There was no street lights. My father had converted the cellar under the stairs so that when the sirens went, they would pick us up and take us down into the cellar, and he'd made bunk beds there, and we would be there in the bunk beds, and we could hear the planes going over. Newport wasn't badly attacked, but between Newport there was Cardiff and Bristol, so there were a lot of planes going over. But my father always used to say, "Oh, don't worry, that's one of ours." And we believed him, but I don't know whether that was always accurate. But meantime, of course, I was growing up, went to the high school, got a scholarship there, played netball and tennis, and had a good time. I was still attached to the church. I had contact with the youth clubs. There were no nightclubs in those days, but you could go to the youth club, mix with boys and the choir boys. And my mother always used to say, "You can bring them in. I don't want you hanging around outside. Bring your friends in." And of course we had the pianola, and Taylor and Tegan recently played it, didn't you? And put the rolls in, and everybody could play that, and that was good fun. Then of course I got a job. I belonged to a dance class, so I used to go dancing, and it was great. I really had a good time. Then the third decade, which was the 50s to the 60s, by this time I'd met your wonderful grandfather, and we got married. We've just been discussing that as to how he proposed to me and how it all came about, because in those days you didn't go off on holidays together just like that, but we'd been going out for 2 years, and Frankie said, "Why don't we go abroad? I'll get my father's car and we can go off and have a holiday." So, yeah, right. He said, "Well, I'll ask your mother and father." So we were in the house, and he went in and said, "Oh, we're thinking we'd go on holiday, this year, and take my father's car. Is that okay?" And my mother said, "Oh no." And that was it. My father didn't have a say. So, bit shattered, George Gibby comes out and thinks, "Oh, well." So he said to me, "I know what we'll do. We'll get married." So that was his romantic proposal to me. And we got engaged, so he did achieve what he wanted, because he did borrow his father's car, and we did go for 3 weeks honeymoon, which was fantastic. But that's another story. There were no TV or mobile phones when we moved to Norwich in the September of 53. We had a radio, a gramophone, and that was it. But we were free. We didn't have children to bother us, so we could go to the theatre. We had a wine tasting system going, where we'd go as a group of friends and then go back either to my place or one of the others and have an evening meal. So it was great up until 1957, when along came
Dave ruined it.
Yeah. So that was the end of all the wine tasting. Well, these two can confirm that, and I'm sure Chris could say the same. It just changed your life. But it was great, and of course, not only did that come around, but in 58 we moved to Plymouth, and in Plymouth, in no time at all, we had Rich and we had Cara. And that was the 3rd decade had gone already, just like that. The 4th decade came with Phil, and a lovely house in Plymouth, and it was great. 4 children under 8. You managed, you worked together. Dave was 7.5 when Phil was born, but he proved to be the one who would be very careful about his little brothers and his sister, and he was always very caring. He would walk round to the shops to get sweets or something for them, but he always lined them up against the wall of the gardens, not on the roadside. Got them all organised, you know, and I could see him getting these 3 organised before they set out to go round the corner. So we had a wonderful life in Plymouth. We could pick up the children from school, or I could take them down to the Hull, to the coast, or take them out to Dartmoor. And that's perhaps where Rich got his love of Dartmoor from, at that early age. Or, of course, the other big important place was North Road Station. And that was where the trains were, George. And that's where I'd take them down. Cara would be bored, wouldn't you? But the others would be taking then the numbers of the trains as they came in. It was a busy station. And it was great. It was very happy times. And at that stage also, we bought our caravan and took it down to Hemwick. And we had such glorious weekends down there. I'd drive to the City Hall, pick up Frankie, and we'd be down in Cornwall on the beach by 6:30. And when everybody else was going home, our lot would be down there starting to dig and do whatever. So it was great. But that had to come to an end when George got promotion, and we moved up to Cwmbran. That was 1969 when we moved in there, and there was a different life again there. The kids were growing up by this time, and I could start to think of other things that I wanted to do, and I joined the Women's Royal Voluntary Service and did 15 years voluntary service with them. I've got a medal to prove it. So that was another different time in my life. Then we came to the 7th decade, which is the 90s up to the end of the century. But there were weddings to come. There were weddings before that. Rich and Jess had got married, and of course then had their children, There you are. Where's? Oh, there he is. Yes. And of course that meant we could go abroad. Cara was in Paris. Well, we would go over to Paris and stay there in their flat. Chris was there sometimes, or you were abroad with whatever. I've forgotten the name of it. What was the name of it? Geoservices. Yeah, that's it. Temporary memory loss. And of course, then Harrod came along, and that was 95. And 2 years later, amazingly, along comes Dill on exactly the same day. So that was quite something to celebrate. Frankie and I started to go on cruises. He was feeling more confident. He didn't want to go particularly. I was always the one that said, oh, I think it'd be great to go on a cruise. And eventually he caved in and we went to Madeira for a week. And that was the start. And of course after that we all went, and as you know, you've all been on the 2003 cruise where we went for our golden wedding. I'd also been a magistrate since 1974, and I retired after having done 25 years of that. So I did my bit for the community, shall we say. The 8th decade now was 2010 or 2012, and it was then that we started to go to Chicago, because we'd been out for your wedding and we decided we'd come and inflict ourselves on you every 3 months or whatever it was that we could manage, because we'd had Cara and Chris in Paris, where we could go there, which was a delight, and then Rich and Jess in Germany, and we could go there and enjoy all that. It was great. People said, oh, you're never at home, because that was all, we were all away. And of course then George, Kate and Tess arrived, and Tess was the last of our there you are, the last of our grandchildren. And then of course we went on the cruise. George wasn't even born then, was he? Oh, George was, it was Tess, that's right, you wouldn't remember. But then at the end of, in that decade, Dave and Viv got married. So again, it was another place to go and visit, and we just extended our family more and more into the 9th decade. Chris and Gemma had got married and produced my first great-grandchildren. There they are, Tegan and Taylor. And that was something, another generation. And then, of course, the next thing was another wedding, Tom and Tash. And 2 more little ones, suddenly on the family, the tail end of the family tree. It was fabulous having Olwyn and Evelyn as great-grandchildren, joining Taylor and Tegan. So that really sort of brought me up to the end of my 90 years. But this is the important bit. All that I've told you is just ramblings of my life. But the important bit to me is you, my family. My life and Grandpa Frankie's, we always put the family first, and we had pride in all of your achievements throughout your lives. And I want to thank you all in poor words for all the lovely gifts, the cards, the tartan, the cake, everything that you all do for me, putting up decorations to make this a special, special day for me. And I especially want to say thank you to all of you for the love and care that you give to me. The phone calls, Skyping, visits and to your homes, and you come to me. That's all very special. And of course, I couldn't go without saying, as David said, that Karen and Chris have been my lifeline these last 2 years with COVID. But I hope that you will know how much you all mean, each and every one of you, to me. Enjoy this weekend. I appreciate the fact that you've all made the effort to come and to make this my special day or weekend. But I hope you'll remember it as a fun weekend, and that although it's been a short visit for you from Chicago, I appreciate you coming. It will be a memorable one for me. But thank you all.